My mother has always been, and I thought would always be, my biggest cheerleader. And boy, oh boy, could she cheer. She would cheer for her children, her friends' children, the parents on the opposite team's children. She would clap her hands and say, "Run, baby, run," all the while cheering for the enemy. She indeed cheered the loudest for her children. To her, we were the world's perfect children. She knew we were perfect, made sure we knew we were perfect, and encouraged others in knowing that we were perfect. Until I wasn't. It was the summer of 1992, and my first full year at Xavier University had just come to an end. Having gone off to college straight out of the 11th grade, I nor my body was prepared for the party. Not one to get sick very easily, we were so surprised by the flu that took over me. Afraid to die, I made an appointment with our family doctor, who saw me right away. Little did I know that what she would tell me would kill me faster than any flu. I was pregnant and 17. I can still see it like it was yesterday. I stared at the doctor in disbelief, even told her that she should go make sure she didn't switch my test with someone else's. She grabbed the tissues and handed them to me before the tears could fall. Why is she giving me Kleenex? I thought. The only one that would be crying here is her when she is embarrassed by her misdiagnosis. Doc, you have to recheck. I don't have sex. She looked at me above her knowing invisible glasses and escorted me out. If there ever was a time I wished I had listened to my mother, this was it. But now I was going to have to listen to my mother. I did the only thing I could think to do. I called my sister and told her she had to help me. We made a plan to tell her together that night. Even repeating the words 23 years later still makes me tremble. My mom stood frozen, holding a huge 3-ring binder that crashed to the floor. Her hands still positioned as if holding a book, she fell to her chair and began to pound the desk, saying, "Why? Why? Why? I would have put up my head on a chopping block to say, not my daughter!" After her outburst, she looked at me. It was the longest stare. She calmly lifted herself from the table and retreated to her room. She literally put on sackcloth and ashes. The 1990s style, of course, and didn't utter words to anyone for a week. A phone call broke the silence. "Do you have a pen?" she said gruffly. "Call this number," she commanded, and hung up the phone. This was the abortion clinic hotline. That is when I cried. For real. Not like the tears I had cried before, a cry of disbelief that my mother expected perfection to the point that she would force me to kill this little unborn child. She had taught me different. I'd heard her say it to others, but that wasn't good enough for me. Later, I learned that this ploy was her obnoxious way of saying, "Get the facts. And just in case you were thinking it, abortion ain't the way." I never wanted to cry like that again. I didn't think I'd ever cry like that again until I did. This time, it would be worse. It was the summer of 2014, and our household was buzzing. In just a few days, our first to go away to college would be leaving for LSU. I had had such a long day of scholarship hunting and dorm room packing that when I fell into my bed, I meant that thing. I snored as fast as my big nose could carry me. Suddenly, the torch of the glaring overhead light ruined my sleep, and I looked up to see my daughters standing at the door, together. My stomach was sick. I didn't know why I was sick, but I knew I was going to be sick. Then Lauren spoke. My sister is pregnant. This had to be deja vu. This could not be happening to me in the same way I had done this to my mother. Her with her sister and I with mine, the movie was stuck on repeat. I lifted from that pillow and let out a holler. What did you just say to me? My sister is pregnant, she choked through the tears. And then it happened. I became my mother. I commenced a temper tantrum. I jumped from the bed, banged on the walls, and with breasts swinging themselves out of my clothes, I screamed things at my daughter that would make me ashamed. I did the only thing I knew. I put on sackcloth and ashes. The new millennial style, of course. I called my mother. She had been through this before, and surely she could tell me what to do. I expected that she would cry and be disappointed. When she picked up the phone, I just blurted it out. Brittany is pregnant. I cringed. I waited for the lamentation, and it never came. My mother, the one that made me call the abortion clinic, simply said, Mignon, a baby is not a death sentence. Look at you now. No one says, oh my God, do you remember she had Dylan when she was 18? I wanted her to be angry with me. I wanted her to react, but she didn't. She calmly said, I know how you feel, but now is the time to love your daughter. In fact, a baby is the best of the worst things that could have happened. Later that week in my small group mentors meeting, I let it go. I cried to them and poured out my expressions of grief. Finally, one leaned over, grabbed my hands and said, are you done? I looked at her and she said, it's so funny how the world works. My friend was just weeping over her embarrassment and her failed attempts at motherhood last night, just like you did. The difference? Your daughter has created life. My friend's daughter took her own life. In that moment, I cried. I cried for the way I had treated my daughter. I cried for the way I smacked God in the face. He was the creator of life, and none of this was a surprise to him. I wiped my eyes, gathered myself, and got my life. My daughter and I had to prepare to start living. You make this look so easy, Mom, my daughter said later that night. You were a teen mom once, and look how great you turned out. It just gives me hope to know how great I'm going to be. I feel like now I know what I have to become. It was confirmed. She had been listening. On January 14th, 2015, we welcomed that little girl into life. Lincoln Carter Francois Hammonds, or as I refer to her, Madam President. One day she might just change the world. The Lord knows she's already started changing me.